When you know what you want for the future, you need the present to line up with your goals. UCF Online offers more than 100 fully online programs in healthcare, engineering, criminal justice, and more, so you can get to your future and beyond.
From the University of Central Florida's Center for Distributed Learning
and the University of Louisville's Delphi Center for Teaching and Learning.
I'm Tom Cavanaugh.
And I'm Kelvin Thompson.
And you are listening to Topcast, the teaching online podcast. Hi, Kelvin.
Hey, Tom. How are you?
It's nice to see you virtually.
Yep. My last remote recording in the Florida room in Florida.
Yeah. So for those who may not be watching this, I'll describe that if you have seen any of our videos, the Kelvin's background has been fairly consistent when we've done sort of these remote at home sort of recordings, but it looks different now. The Florida room is a little sparse as you are preparing to make your move north.
And notice ye old wooden folding chair of yon grassy knoll outside of the Digital Learning Center in the background.
Okay.
Preparing to make its trip.
All right. Well, I hope you have, many grassy knoll conversations in Kentucky. There are plenty of grassy knolls up there in horse country.
Yeah. The grass being blue, I'm led to believe. I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I don't know that for sure.
Yeah. Well, Kelvin, I see you sipping, and I have something here myself. So
tell us what you're drinking there, Tom.
What I'm drinking?
Yes.
Well, I've gone with one of my standards. I've got my San Francisco Bay Fog Chaser. With the more environmentally friendly pods, but it also is, I think it's a good cup of coffee.
So we are back to the BYOCC version of the podcast, Tom. That's bring your own coffee and connection. So in addition to your coffee, do you have a connection to share?
Well, I could make a very strained connection, but I'd probably give away what we're talking about today, but of course so I don't know. I could make an attempt, but maybe I should wait until after you do your more formal, thoughtful connection.
Yes, strained connections are my purview, Tom, not yours. So I'll tell you about in my U of L coffee cup today is a single origin Honduras from, I kind of like the name, Yes Please Coffee in Los Angeles, California. And I thought this coffee would be appropriate for today's episode for two reasons. First, the roasters say, quote, "We believe great coffee should be for everyone," unquote. And second, these roasters emphasize multiple tiers of quality in sourcing the coffee beans, selecting the coffee beans, and shipping the coffee beans right to individuals' homes so that there's excellence in the cup, right after their fresh roasting. So could you, and the coffee's quite good here, I'm sure yours is delectable for you, but could you find a connection in my coffee cup to today's topic?
Well, you made reference to sort of multiple sources. That seems like it's a bit of a clue to me. And obviously quality, that was a key word in there. So I think those two things might be part of it. What, did you say something about? Did you say something about equitable?
Yeah, for everyone. For everyone. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so I think those are that's the triad of connection I'm seeing there potentially.
That's what I was shooting for.
Okay.
So, 0.3 from the German judge, as always. That's right.
Cool. I don't really have a connection for mine. I could make something up, but it would just be
that's
dumb.
all right.
Yeah.
I'm happy to offer up a tenuous connection. I'm used to it. It's all good.
It's all good. Yeah. So do you want me to kind of explain how my triad of connection points fits to what we're talking about today?
Please do.
So, Kelvin, recently you interviewed our colleague and friend, Dr. Tanya Joosten. And Dr. Joosten's name is probably familiar to many of our Topcast listeners because she's been a guest previously. She was a guest back in season 2, episode number 15. And for anyone who's not familiar with Tanya, Dr. Joosten is a senior scientist and Director of Digital Learning Research and Development at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where she also serves as advisor to the provost for innovation projects. Tanya is a highly regarded scholar and speaker, and she is quite active, as we all know, in all of the U.S. online education professional associations. In recent years, she is probably most well known as the principal investigator and executive director of the National Research Center for Distance Education and Technological Advancements, DETA, or as they pronounce it, DETA. And you'll get into some of that in your conversation with her. I will say this just on a personal note, as a friend, Tanya, she was one of the first people who really modeled like social media use for me. She's even written a book on social media. But the use of like Twitter, she was into it way before I ever really kind of even like had a Twitter account. And I even went to a conference one time where she had a tweet up. And I went. That was like my first one. So yeah, I learned a lot from her on a lot of fronts, not just in digital learning research areas.
Yeah, agreed. Tanya's great. Treasured colleague for sure. Well, you ready to cut us to the interview? I won't give away any more of it from here.
All right, so with no further ado, through the magic of podcast time travel, here is your interview with Dr. Tanya Joosten.
Hi, Tanya. Welcome to Topcast. So good to have you back.
Well, thanks for having me again.
It was so good the first time. We'll do it a second time.
It's been a while.
It has. And if listeners haven't heard the earlier episode, we talked about your Social Media for Educators book in that prior episode, and people should go listen to that, and they should go buy the book if they haven't already.
Yeah, it's made a little bit of a resurgence with COVID and the move to social media and folks seeking out ways to have more social interaction and engagement amongst their students and just with themselves professionally. So you could buy a used version online for probably $5, so they can go at it.
There you go. But what we didn't talk about on Mike last time that we really are really long overdue to do at this point, while we've given the occasional shout out on the podcast, is we haven't really featured your work with DETA, either homophonic usage of that word, right? So why don't you talk about both uses of DETA?
Sure. So DETA is what we call the research center that we launched in 2014. And so, as Kelvin knows, and for the listeners out there, and so it's the National Research Center for Distance Education and Technological Advancements. And because that's a mouthful, but that was sort of what was written by Congress and the appropriation of the funding for the center, we just sort of kept it. But we kept it for another reason as well, because the acronym is DETA. We were sort of thinking of Star Trek, and we were like, we could just call it the Data Center. And we do awesome things with data, and data is cool. So with the acronym DETA, it's become more commonly known as DATA, or the Data Research Center, which may be very confusing for some folks as to, is this research center really just the data center? because everyone on their campus, I'm sure, has a quote unquote data center, but that's just sort of what we've been calling it. And then we get to have these conversations like this about the acronym and the name, and so maybe it holds a little bit longer in folks' minds.
No, I think that's great historical nugget and context. And as you know, I mean, I've been excited about your center since you got the funding, and I thought it was such a great idea to have kind of a, I don't know, I think maybe we talked about way back then, kind of a centralized national clearinghouse for findings across the field. So I think it'd be great. I mean, this many years into it, just to kind of zoom out a little bit. And what have you learned about the field having done this National Research Center for 8 years?
It's funny, as you say that, I'm thinking like, oh, we probably should like come up with a decade report or something to talk about, to aggregate sort of all of the information we've been sharing and so forth. So I'll add that on my to-do list of 5 million other things I will never get to, but hopefully I will. And I know, Kelvin, you and some of your colleagues as well were part of our first national summit we held at the EDUCAUSE Learning Initiative after receiving the funding. And so what we really wanted it to be was a national effort and a collaborative effort. And part of that is bringing together different folks from across the country that we knew were doing amazing work and had some really key insights to help us develop that national agenda. And with that national agenda, it was things just around how are we defining things? What are the problems that we should be solving or questions we should be pursuing through our research? What are different phenomena or concepts and constructs we should be looking to explore? How do we measure those? Getting in some of the specifics of the instruments, which led to, after months and months of work, the Data Research Toolkit. And most recently, we received additional funding from WCET and the Every Learner Everywhere Network to produce, I say recently, and actually it was probably almost 2 years ago, but, pandemic time, everything's a blur. So we were able to launch a second version of that in late 2021. And it's been really great because we've been able to build on it to the point where there's guides to research in different methodologies with different paradigmatic approaches. There's all sorts of instrumentation and surveys and so forth to help people get started with research. And there's different sort of research models or research designs that folks can use to implement on their own campus to explore different phenomena or to understand the efficacy or identify factors that are going to influence student success. And we're really, when we did the Data Research Toolkit, it was because one of the challenges we found, first, we wanted to share out sort of this national vision that yourself and all of our colleagues came together to sort of formalize. But then also we just realized that a lot of people have problems doing research in this area. So I'm from the field of communication. I speak a somewhat different language than other folks do, coming in as a social scientist. And folks are coming with different academic and scholarly backgrounds. Some folks are coming without academic or scholarly backgrounds at all and looking to better understand, what research can be conducted in order to improve practices, or what are we doing out there operationally and in our units that could be informing research, sort of that research to practice to research. And so the Data Research Toolkit sort of ended up being somewhat of a how-to, but with lots of other good stuff in it and sort of a toolbox of instruments. And so now the Data Research Toolkit has been, we thought 50 people were going to download it. We've had thousands of people all over the world. I think we're at 35 countries, every state of the U.S. And we've been around, nationally and internationally sharing that toolkit. And so it's available for everyone at dataresearch.org. And so that was one key thing. And we're so lucky to have the funding to put out another one. We're working on a third version of that, which we're hoping it'll be more like an ebook, then with an associated sort of interactive toolkit with it. Again, on my list of 5 million things I would like to do. But the main thing that it helped us do was really create this common language, right? So that research could be conducted cross institutionally. We did have grants, sub-grants, awards, and so we have pockets of research at different programs throughout the country, different institutions. But our vision was to be able to aggregate data across institutions and use that data to identify factors that influence student access and success, and that, were more generalizable. And so that, it would help us really answer these key questions to improve our practices. And, we just ran into a lot of barriers with that, but we still had some success in what we were able to forge through. And as we were talking before the show, one of those challenges is sort of uncertainty around data. Mm-hmm. What can we share? What can we not share? Folks not necessarily understanding IRB or not understanding FERPA and those sorts of things. And so people tend to build up, prisons around their data and not share that, even though, of course, we had national IRB approval for all of our studies. Everything was within FERPA guidelines. All of the data we were receiving was anonymized and all of those good things. But that was a big challenge that we had run into.
Yeah, no, those are a lot of milestones along the way over the last 8 years, and I think a 10-year retrospective is a probably good idea.
Right.
You start now, maybe it'll be done in.
There we go. I had to schedule a few hours a month. Yeah,
that's right. You mentioned the pandemic and the pandemic response. I wonder, from your perspective within the work of DETA, what kind of impact has the ripples from the COVID era made on the work that you do through the center?
Yeah, so I think it definitely put emphasis on work that we always felt were important, but not necessarily, the entire country. And so, we had received actually responses to a lot of our grant funding that were not, they weren't requests for proposals specific to online. And a lot of the responses were, we shouldn't be investing in online learning. This is not an important area. I actually got grant feedback like a week before the pandemic and why would we fund this on distance education? And so it was because this was the future and it got here a little quicker. We did have cross-institutional research we had been doing on what we call instructional characteristics. So characteristics more or less about teaching and instruction and learning that influences student outcomes. You were part of developing that instrumentation around quality indicators. We incorporated lots of the different quality tools that were out here across the nation for, I guess, almost 20 years now, when you think of the original development of the research around Quality Matters and the Cal State University Chico rubric. And so all of that was sort of blended into that instrument to help us better understand students' experience about the instruction, the course structure, but also about their experiences interacting in the course and identifying statistically through regression analysis, what factors were actually influencing student outcomes. And we developed what's called the quality indicators. It was an infographic, a one-page infographic that actually is an accumulation of 250 pages of research. But that became amazingly popular. And so our study was in the Online Learning Journal in 2019. The infographic, again, it's all available on our website at dataresearch.org and our publications. But just having those 8 indicators for folks that were new to trying to figure out this remote instruction, online blended learning thing was something very consumable and that folks, all over the world were really excited to see. So beyond sort of that, how do we have quality and blended online piece, I think there were 2 other things that really were important. Not only was the pandemic happening, right? We had a resurgence and fighting for social justice with the whole Black Lives Matter movement that, regained energy because of the awful deaths, to folks in our community. And so, although DETA's mission has always been around access and equity, with our research specifically looking at traditionally underrepresented groups, racially minoritized students, poverty affected first generation, students with disabilities and impairments, which the research I just mentioned about quality, we also disaggregated the data and we did analysis of variance, MANOVA studies looking at differences between the groups. And we found that not only were these quality indicators as a whole predictive of student outcomes, but when we disaggregated the data and just look at like racially minoritized students, we also found out that those indicators work to predict outcomes for that group of students as well. And that's super important. And the research before sort of never, again, like people were barely doing research on quality predicting student outcomes, much less were they looking at traditionally underrepresented groups. And so with support from WCET, we were able to take on new efforts to identify evidence and research through a systematic review that was impacting student outcomes for racially minoritized students. We have a research review on our website. And then we also were able to continue our own research with funding from the Spencer Foundation before the pandemic started, but extra important now in online learning readiness. And so being able to identify what sorts of attitudes, behaviors, skills do students need coming into blended and online courses in order to ensure they're successful. And so that was just another piece sort of the equity puzzle there. So not only did our quality research become really important, knowing what we needed to do in our practice to improve student outcomes, but also understanding like what can we be doing right now to improve equity in our courses and our programs and at our institutions. Because a lot of folks didn't realize there was research out there, not a great amount of research, but there was research out there to guide us in understanding things we could implement right away to remove some of those barriers for racially minoritized students and other traditionally underrepresented groups so that they're able to succeed. And so that was sort of a second piece. And I know I'm just rambling on, and I'll get to the blended piece. And I know you like the blended piece, but I'll stop there for a bit.
Hey, I like the equitable.
I can get going. You know that.
I know. I do know this. This is dangerous, the two of us talking together. Yeah, I like the equitable outcomes piece too, as much as I like blended learning. We spoke recently to Katrina Ware about the practice of instructional designers in facilitating equitable outcomes through the instructional design process. And I think what you just shared, I remember reading one of your research reviews where some of those findings were presented, and I remember thinking how powerful that is, to see that the what I think maybe we think of as sort of the general instructional design process and outcomes has particular salience for minoritized student populations, and I think that's really great to keep in mind, because like from the conversation with Katrina, I think it'd be really easy for listeners to think, oh, I've got to do something super special different,
right.
And that may be true to a point, right, to go further, but hey, just doing the work that you do every day has really important benefits. But yes, as you say, as we begin to wrap up, you and I both love blended learning. We've both been saying the same thing, although, credit, you've been saying it longer, I discovered.
Oh, I'm not sure.
I think so, because I think you said it in a published piece before I stumbled along to the same concept, which is, blended learning is the future now more than ever. What is there an intersection between the work of DETA and that belief in the future of blended learning? What might you leave our listeners with as a salient point as we begin to wrap up?
Yeah, I think I've always been interested, right, in the social interaction, the human behavior with technology, and how that leads to these experiences that are meaningful and they're enjoyable, and you have some sort of positive outcome from. And so, when we launched, we started Blended a very long time ago, like 20 years ago. But if you teach face-to-face and you teach online and you teach blended, there's just some sort of synergy there. And speaking of our equity work, right, we learned that course design that we're already doing for effective learning, creating that structure, creating those activities leads to positive outcomes for all students, in particular for racially minoritized students. And then we also found from the research that hybrid and blended learning that is properly designed with structure, to guide and scaffold students' activities, also positively influences outcomes, which we've known for a while, but now we also know, in particular, it helps racially minoritized students. And so these are things that we've known for a while, that, creating a social system, right? Creating structure more meaningfully, planning interaction and activities, it's sort of that social system, that sort of realm that we can mold and create into something really amazing. And I think that the key isn't technology. I think key is always the social process. It's the social, right? But I think that technology provides us affordances that we wouldn't otherwise have. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. We could talk for another half hour on.
I'm sure.
this topic alone, let alone others. And hey, we need to have you back and talk about additional threads in the conversation. We won't wait so long as we did between your first and second appearances.
I'll see you in 2029.
That's right. And what we'll be doing, then it'll be like, you should really be preparing for that 20-year retrospective.
Right, exactly.
Data. At that point. Well, it's been a delight talking to you, as it always is, Tanya. And on behalf of Tom, who will be joining us in the wraparound, and myself right here and right now, just thank you for the work that you do every day through DETA and in our broader field. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, and thanks for supporting our efforts.
Well, Kelvin, that was your interview with Dr. Tanya Joosten.
Indeed. Tanya's great, right? I mean, we're lucky to have her in our field.
Yeah, absolutely. There's probably a lot of different things that we could highlight in this conversation, but sort of in the interest of time, is there something that jumped out at you that you'd like to start with?
Oh gosh, I think we've alluded to this on the podcast before, but I'll keep it really simple and distilled and say that a theme that I heard again in that conversation with Tanya echoes themes that we've had, and it was also like talking to Shannon Riggs a little bit. Design is so important. Tanya talked about the online course quality indicators, which is just a way of breaking down what it is to intentionally design. And then she talked about that study that she did with Rachel Casadas, where their big takeaway is one of my favorite quotes is, design is the most influential measure of instructional characteristics that potentially increases student outcomes. And then everything else in the conversation was just really about the impact of that kind of intentional design. Like it benefits everybody, but particularly marginalized student subpopulations and so forth.
Yeah, that was a theme that sort of jumped out to me a little bit, this sort of focus on equity and how can we, through research, ensure that our course designs are equitable and serving those students who kind of have traditionally been marginalized. I thought that was a really interesting emphasis, kind of a, underlying, catalyst for this whole project, and at least in her mind a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I remember when what became the data center was coalescing, in the ether, and the promise was great, and the challenge was high. This idea of enabling institutions to share data, research findings in an apples to apples kind of way that through which we can synthesize findings that are more generalizable, that speak to more scenarios. And that's not easy work, but it's important work. And I think they've made some real strides there, but I've talked to her before off microphone, and it's not it's not as easy as some people might think that it would be.
Yeah, well, it never is. I mean, it's the old duck swimming on the water. Looks calm on top and furiously paddling underneath, right? I think all good work is like that, and certainly what she's doing at UWM is really good work. Mm-hmm. So, any sort of last thoughts before we kind of look at landing our plane here?
Again, a shout out. I mean, you've credited me many times with this statement about blended learning, and as Tanya and I talked about, we've both been saying it. Technically, she's been saying it longer, but it's nice to slide in here too. Blended is the future now. More than
you guys
ever.
did talk about that, and that is true. I mean, she has, for many years, been kind of a driving force behind the OLC Blended Conference when it was called that. So, credit where credit is due. All right, well. Thanks, Kelvin, for doing that interview with Tanya, and thanks to Tanya for taking the time to be back on Topcast. That was great. Mm-hmm. You want to try and wrap it up?
Sure thing. Perhaps I'll say that enabling the integration of online learning data across multiple institutions is not easy, but the result is worth the effort. We gain generalizable insights that enrich the field and ensure that students are benefiting from our collective work. How's that?
That's good. Yeah, that's true. All right. So before we go, just a quick reminder that linked from each and every episode on whatever podcast platform you're listening to are show notes containing carefully curated resource links that pair well with the episode, like our coffee pairs well. If you're not checking out these links, you're definitely missing out. So, check them out. Don't miss out. Check it before you wreck it. Maybe that'll be our new. Be sure to check the resources. So you can also find them online at the Topcast website, which is topcast.online.ucf.edu. So awesome. Thanks to you, Kelvin, and to Tanya for that conversation. Until next time, for Topcast, I'm Tom.
I'm Kelvin.
See ya.